Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway.
Welcome back to Paris History avec Hemingway. Today we are talking about Pont de la Tournelle in the Latin Quarter. And Claudine's going to take us for a little walk around Paris. So grab a coffee and enjoy the show.
Yeah, we are going to start this one. We're going to start right on well, it's technically, they call the islands, or they think the islands are part of the right bank. But we're going to start right on the edge of the island of Ile Saint Louis and head over the Pont de la Tournelle, they'll take us over to the Latin Quarter. And I love the Pont de la Tournelle, and I really loved it when I found out who that lovely statue is standing on the top of it, who we've talked about before. But the Pont de la Tournelle is, of course, one of the over 30 bridges that span the Seine within Paris proper. And this one was the current bridge itself was built in 1928, but the original bridge goes back to 1620. Many of the bridges way back when, which I thought today, I was like, we should do an episode just about the bridges, because I'm obsessed with the bridges and they all have so many great stories and how they were built and what they're named after. But many of the bridges originally were built out of wood, and wood in water isn't always the greatest combination. So they wash away. So over the time, there's pictures you could see online of this great flood that's happened through all throughout Paris history. There's also ones where it was just the Seine was literally like frozen ice, chunks of ice floating down the river. All those things damage the bridges over time. The first one that was built in 1620, excuse me, washed away on January 21st, 1651. Rebuilt in 1656 in stone, and that one lasted until 1918. So
Wow.
quite a long time. On the bridge itself, and on the corner over on the left bank side, is, if you look up, there is a very, very large statue. And almost just looks like just a huge pillar. And that statue is of Saint Geneviève. And we did 2 episodes last year about Saint Geneviève because I just love her. She, of course, is the patron saint of Paris. And Paul Landowski did that. It was inaugurated in 1928, same time the bridge was built. Paul Landowski is also the same artist that did Christ the Redeemer, that's in Rio de Janeiro. That is that huge, like way up on the highest point of Rio, the huge statue of Christ with his arms all the way out. And he also did a couple other ones that are in Paris, and one of which we will talk about today. But the Pont de la Tournelle is just, it leads over there to the Ile Saint Louis. And on the left bank side, right at the very edge of it, is a very famous restaurant that goes back to 1582, which is known as La Tour d'Argent. A lot of people know this for another little reason. But they like to say, as in many of these places in Paris, they like to say they're the oldest restaurant, but it wasn't actually, they cannot find an actual mention of this restaurant until 1860. So they say it dates to 1582, but there's no reference at all before 1860.
That's very tricky. I don't trust it.
It's also like the Procope, which is on right over there at Odeon, that they like to say they're the oldest restaurant in Paris, but literally it would be basically, if you equated it back to, in, at least on the West Coast, we have 7-Elevens where it's just basically, you go get gas and get a coffee.
Yeah.
This place was, you went to go get hay for your horses and you got a coffee. So basically it was like, I don't think you could say you're the oldest restaurant in Paris when you were basically a 7-Eleven.
I'm sure they would appreciate that.
I know. Well, and it's funny because pretty much I've found in all my research of the history of Paris, anything that says it's the oldest, if it's outside of it being like a building or the Roman arena and things like that, if it is a restaurant or a business that calls itself the oldest, it's not.
Lies.
I know, it's all lies.
Gas
They're all
station, hay station.
I know, they're just tricking us. But it was at one point, that area, the whole area along the Seine, it wasn't built up and have these beautiful walkways like we know it today. It was all sloped into the water. So, when it was on the edge of the Louvre and all this, it just sloped right into the water, and it was the banks of a river. It wasn't what we see today. But the Tour d'Argent there was a smaller building there. Then they built this huge building that they have now, and it sits up there. It has these great windows and has an amazing view over towards Notre Dame. Currently, it's closed right now for restoration. But during World War II, one of my favorite stories about it is they ended up because they had such a huge wine collection that dated back, centuries. They and the Germans, these German officers loved coming to Paris and getting all this good wine. So they actually boarded up the cellar and hid it behind a fake wall. They built this whole wall in front of it, and the Germans never knew it was there.
So smart.
So smart. And they recently, I think it was just within the last couple of years, they recently put a bunch of those bottles up for auction. But when you're talking about a bottle that's maybe 200 years old, you have, it's a roll of the dice. It is kind of one of those things that you're just going to keep it for posterity's sake than actually drink it, because most likely it's probably not so great. Unfortunately. Well, the other thing they're really known for is their pressed duck. And in 1890, the chef Frederick Delaire started this, and it was a pressed duck. And if you're a little squeamish, maybe, plug your ears during this one. But what they do is they cook a duck, and then after they cut, the meat, and they give you, they slice off the meat and present it all to you. They have this contraption that looks a little bit like a torture device. And it has a cylinder in the bottom of it, and then it has a huge crank on the top. And you put all of the duck carcass in there and all of the goodness that was part of it, and you start cranking this thing, and it just is like it just cranks along, and it basically squishes everything out of those bones. And then they take it and they cook it down as a sauce to put it over. And apparently, I've not had this, and I love duck. I would totally do this. But this is also like extremely expensive. But it is supposed to be absolutely unbelievable. And if you watched one of Anthony Bourdain's shows when he was in Paris, he went to Doulorin, which is over there in Les Halles, and went in there and bought one of the pressed duck presses. And after he died, a few years after he died, they did a huge auction of his stuff for charity, and that pressed duck, the duck press, was in it.
That sounds not yummy, though. That sounds kind of gross.
Well, it's just, I think sometimes it's like you just don't want to know how the sausage is made, kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you.
Maybe let's just not know how it's made. But they number the ducks, and as of before the COVID in 2020, they have served 1.2 million of those ducks.
Wow. Okay, so they're quite popular. Maybe
they're very popular. Yeah. Delicious. Yeah. It was owned by one family until 1911, and then it was sold and purchased by the Tarani family. But what you might know a little bit more about it is because that Disney movie Ratatouille, it is the restaurant they use. They basically, Tour d'Argent is the inspiration.
That is so cool. Now I really want to go. That's the more important thing here.
Yeah. And I stayed one time in an apartment at the end of Boulevard Saint-Germain, and it was basically kind of right across from it. And one night, Ratatouille was on French TV, and I was looking out the window, and they have a flag, a Tour d'Argent flag that's over their restaurant. And I'm sitting there watching it, looking at the Tower of Notre Dame and seeing this flag of Tour d'Argent while Ratatouille was on the TV. I was like, this is all very strange.
All very strange.
But they also have next door, they have a bakery. And then they also have like a little bistro that's there too. And then during COVID, when everybody got to add so much space out on, the street and everything for outdoor tables, they started setting up tables over on Pont de la Tournelle on the corner where there's this huge amount of space. And they still were doing it this summer. So if you're coming to Paris next summer, definitely go check it out and see. It's definitely a little bit much more less expensive, but it's still really great food. I have eaten there a couple times. It's really great, and the bakery's really good, except for somebody one time told me they saw something running through it, like maybe that's also has to do with Ratatouille, but not a cartoon. It said I'm terrified.
No.
This was like somebody said that they saw that in the window like 10 years ago.
I don't trust it. 10 years ago is a long time.
10 years ago is a long time, but I had gone in there so many times because when I was staying right up the street from it, I'd go there almost every morning and get a pain au chocolat or croissant. And then I was just like, yeah, when they told me, even though I'm deathly afraid of those, I was like, yeah, whatever.
Worth it.
It's really good. It's really good. We'll head right down the street. From there turns into Rue Carnot-Lemoine. This is the Quartier Saint-Victor. And then in Paris, every arrondissement is broken into 4 quarters. And so this one, most people don't even know. Do you know which one it is that you live in?
No idea.
Yeah, it's like, Odeon is probably the most famous one and probably the only one people really know. Other than that, nobody really and I've tried to find, sometimes if you look them up, like on Wikipedia, if you're on the French Wikipedia, you could see what it'll say where the quartier is. But most Parisians, the only one they really know is Odeon, because that's the only one that's really called that. But Saint Victor it heads right because there was a church that was there. The street Rue Carnot-Lemoine is named for the French Cardinal Jean Lemoine. He served from 1250 to 1313. He had the nave of Notre Dame du Paris created. So he was the one who spearheaded behind having that built. Also on this street, there's somebody very famous, but we're not going to go up there, but I'll tell you at the top of the street who lived there. But in number 2, Paul Verlaine lived there. When he was married to Mathilde. They lived there after their wedding of August 11th, 1870, and they stayed there for 1 year. Paul Verlaine was the French poet that also ended up getting in one of my favorite salacious stories, which I don't know if we even talked about here, is his relationship with the young poet Arthur Rimbaud, who he had said, hey, come to Paris and hang out. You're such a good writer. And then they started a little affair.
Ooh.
And then his wife was not fond of that because they had to leave Paris because you could not carry on a homosexual relationship at that time. It was against the law. So they went up to Belgium, but they couldn't really be together, but they couldn't be apart. And at one point, Paul decided to try to get rid of him by shooting him. And he shot Arthur Rimbaud in the wrist. And then Paul Verlaine went to jail for a few years. And that actually is what ended their relationship.
A few years for a shot in the wrist?
Yeah, for a few years for a shot in the wrist. Yes.
Wow.
He actually died just up the street too. But this street, it's really great. It's a very steep street. So this is the Latin Quarter. It gets very steep because you're going to head up to the backside of Monton Saint-Geneviève, which is where the Pantheon is. There was also a school here. There was a college here at one point that Cardinal Lemoine actually opened. And it was a college that was in place from 1303 to 1790. And then, of course, 1790, we're talking about the Revolution. So then it was gone, but that's kind of sad. It was for over almost 500 years.
That is sad. 500 years later and didn't survive.
It didn't survive. There's schools in the US that aren't even 500 years old yet. But at number 28, and this is a place that we definitely should go check out sometime, is the Paradis Latin. It opened in 1802. It is much like, the Moulin Rouge and all of those kind of really fun clubs. But this one is really great. And I actually, when I'm doing planning for clients that are coming to Paris, this is one I recommend to them a lot because the Moulin Rouge gets very expensive and it's also very touristy, but the Paradis Latin is really great. And it has 720 seats inside. But what's really cool is that the inside was constructed by Gustave Eiffel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Originally, it was built in 1830 under Napoleon. And then over time, all of the different writers of the 19th century loved to hang out there, Balzac and Dumas. It was destroyed during the Prussian War of 1870. And then 1887 is when Gustave Eiffel had it rebuilt. And there's inside of it, you have a lot of that iron structure. On January 20th, 1889, it was inaugurated. And then a woman that we've talked about before, Yvette Gilbert, she actually performed there. She was a real big proponent of it and performed there and actually would bring a bunch of people there. And then also Toulouse-Lautrec used to hang out there. So he wasn't just at the Moulin Rouge, he also hung out at a bunch of other places. But it's a really cool one. It is one of the oldest clubs in Paris. And it's it's definitely much more of a, a local, less touristy way, which there's nothing wrong with doing the touristy things, but the Moulin Rouge, it's really expensive. I mean, it's up to $200 just to go per
Yeah,
person.
it is very expensive now.
Yeah, it is very expensive. But it's a cool one to go check out. This one in 1973 was going to be torn down and turned into apartments, but when the theater was discovered, Jean Kriegel was the one who was going to buy it, and when he got in there and discovered everything that was inside and that how Gustave Eiffel designed it, he decided to bring it back to life. The cabaret now, it's open Wednesday through Monday, and they have shows at 7:30, and they even do sometimes they do them in the daytime.
Oh, nice.
So, if you want to get in there, but the tickets are anywhere from 45 euros up to 200 euros. A lot of times that's when it includes dinner and VIP seating and, champagne and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it depends on what level of comfort you want.
Yes, exactly. So for 45 euros, you're sitting on a box.
Behind a wall.
Exactly, behind a pole,
Exactly.
Yeah, but right next to it is there is a La Poste, and I don't think we've ever told anybody to go like mill around a post office before. Besides the post offices in Paris, they're really hit and miss, and they're more miss if you've ever had to go to the French post office and had to deal with that. It's when you get somebody that's really nice and really really easy that's going to help you, it's a rarity because they could be a prickly bunch in there. Like I think post offices in the US are like that too.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get. Government workers, man, you just don't know what mood they're going to be in.
And not my favorite right now. But inside the basement here is pieces of the Philippe Auguste wall. And we've talked about these a few times, how they would go around this the city, and Paris had numerous walls over time. The first original one was with around inside Ile de la Cité. So it wasn't even, because again, like I said, there was just the banks of the river went down. And so these walls would just kind of basically like, this is the marking. Now it's the peripherique, it's a quote unquote wall around, because that's where the edges of Paris is. But some of these remnants of these walls still exist. And down there, they do have it. And that's also where there's the Bière River. There was another river that actually flowed through Paris, but they've covered it all up, and there's still talks of them someday opening up this river that's basically underneath parts of the city over here from like the 5th up into the 14th. There's talks about opening up the streets again so the river could flow, which I think sounds probably like a lot of money.
That sounds expensive.
It sounds very expensive. But from here, we'll go down Rue des Écoles. If you kept going up Rue de Cardinal Lemoine, if you got all the way up to the top at number 72, that is where Ernest Hemingway and Hadley Hemingway first lived when they came to Paris. They moved in there in January 1922, so almost 101 years ago. But that is where they lived there at the very top, and right around the corner from there is Place de la Contrescarpe, which we definitely have talked about in the past. But we're going to take a right on Rue des Écoles, and at number 2, there, right next on the other side of the post office, is where Louis Braille once lived. And of course, you should know who he is because his last name really gives it away. He is the one who designed the Braille language for, how today, you could read, blind people could read. And he's buried in the Pantheon, and it's kind of cool down at the crypt where he's at. They have these LCD screens, sharing the stories of each of the people buried in each crypt. But for his, they have it's all in Braille.
That's cool. I want to see it. I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's really good. I love going, especially wait to go to the Pantheon when it's really warm out, because then you go downstairs and it's lovely. Don't go right now when it's freezing cold. You would probably freeze to death down there. But at number 7 is one of my favorite restaurants that I love. It's called Bon Vivant. They have a wine bar, but then they also have a restaurant right next to it. And it is really great. It is probably the best steak frites I've ever had. The steaks are amazing. That is one thing I've definitely noticed in Paris, steaks are very hit and miss as well. And that's one thing that that the US does a little bit better sometimes is steaks. You could just get some really, really bad cuts of meat. These guys do, it's amazing. Like it's like huge T-bone steaks. The steak frites are amazing. The wine they have there is all amazing. And it's just a really, really fun atmosphere. So definitely go check that out. I have a full list of some of my favorite restaurants on my website, ClaudineHemingway.com. And it's definitely one of them. I always have my clients go there. And if you keep going a little bit down Rue des Écoles, there is the Square Paul Langevin, and he was a physicist. He lived from 1872 to 1946. The fountain that once stood there at Rue Chaudy-Bois and Rue d'Enfer was moved to here again in 1867. And it's one of those really cool parks that has like the remnants of other things in Paris. So you have that fountain, but it also has some niches that were once on the Hotel de Ville that were saved after the fire of 1871.
How did they save that stuff? Do they just like run out with it or something?
Well, because it was stone, so everything inside of it burned, but the stone facade, it was mostly intact except for the stuff at the top that was really, just under huge heat. Most of that stone, the problem with it, like at Notre Dame, they've saved every single stone and cataloged it. And they're going to reuse some of the stones that are still okay. But what really damages the stone is all the water. So it's not the fire that hurts that stone. It's all of the water.
That makes sense.
And so, especially if, when you think of Notre Dame, how incredibly old that is, far older, 500 years older than Hotel de Ville, and the fire in 1871. So there's quite a few different parks in Paris that have some of the pieces. This just has some of the small niches that once had statues in them. But, we've talked about Hotel de Ville before and how they rebuilt. Basically, what you see today is the same Renaissance style building that originally was there. They just basically rebuilt it from the original plans, which is cool. But the square was designed by Adolphe Alphin in 1868. This was all done under the Haussmann and Napoleon III. The land is so narrow. It's a very narrow park that kind of just runs along the street. They just were like, there's nothing else we could put here. It's just too small. So we'll just put a park there. We'll just do there. But behind it is the wall of the former École Polytechnique. And there's also ceramic pieces that are on this wall from the Palace of Fine Arts at the 1889 Universal Exhibition. So it's a really cool park to go check out and just walk through and just look. So a lot of the parks have these little green signs on the gates when you walk in, and sometimes it'll even give you a little bit about what's in the garden, or at least, it's not going to give you the history, but it might say, these niches were from Hotel de Ville, and maybe who the park was named after. So there's always some of this really great information, just kind of, just sitting out there in plain sight, just to stop and take a look at it. But further down the street, one of the things that always cracks me up, and when I give people tours of the Latin Quarter we walk by, they always notice it too, that there are, and I looked it up one day because I was like, why are there so many? So there are these stores, and I think this is the only part of Paris they're at, but they're basically it's Au Vieux Campeur, the old camper. And there are literally like 12 of these businesses. They're camping stores where you could find camping equipment, and they're all in like a 3-block radius, like 12 of them.
I didn't even know there was camping stores in Paris.
I know. I was like, are there really this many people that camp?
Yeah, like I've never seen any.
They're just like literally you go around the block and then there's another one. And they're all still. So it was open and started in 1949. Or I'm sorry, 1941 by a gentleman named Roger de Rothray. But they have something like 50 stores, and it's been purchased by somebody else after all this time. But it is hilarious. And I, for some reason, was one day walking around there and I kept seeing people with those walking sticks. They look like ski poles without the baskets. And then I realized, oh, that's what they're getting.
I always wonder where French people got those sticks from.
I think that's where. So I think that there's all of these stores so you could go there and get your walking sticks. But they have everything. Like I've not gone in them because the last thing I'm ever going to do if I can help it is camp. So, but they have everything, like an is it REI in the States where you could go and get, tents and all that kind of stuff.
All the stuff we don't want to use.
In case you're coming to Paris and you want to go camping,
You want
that's
to
where
go
you're gonna.
camping in Paris.
Yeah. But it is hilarious. They have their signs are orange and you can't miss them. Right past there is a statue that is of Mihai Eminescu. He was a Romanian romantic poet, and they built this in 1889 originally. This is right down the street. Behind it is the Orthodox Romanian church, and it is a really, really tiny church. I was walking by a couple years ago in the spring on a sunny Sunday day, and the gate was open because it's never open. And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I popped my head in there, and it is really adorable inside. But they were just getting done doing like a baptism, so I didn't want to take any pictures or do anything like that. But right across there is another park. This was the Square Michel Foucault. He was a French philosopher. There's also right next to that, it looks like one big park, but it's also the square of Auguste Mariette Pasha. He was an Egyptologist. He and Champollion ended up being the ones that basically really were the basis of Egyptology. And right behind that is in the Sorbonne is a statue of Champollion. He is in there. This is a college of France. He was the one that translated the Rosetta Stone, and it was 200 years ago this year in September that he was the one who translated the Rosetta Stone, but now the Rosetta Stone's in England.
Yeah, have you ever seen it? It's kind of cool.
No, I haven't seen it. I'm obsessed with Champollion, and our friend Camille is related to him, like on her mother's side. But there is a exhibit at the Louvre Lens. There's a Louvre offset that's up in Lens and north of France, and I'm dying to go up there and go check it out.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I saw the one in London, and it's just like, wow, how did they decipher this thing?
Well, he was, incredibly intelligent. He could pick up languages, like basically you're, reading the newspaper in the morning, there's another language. And he knew all of these different, Oriental and Middle East and all of these different languages. And because he knew so mmany different ones, that's how he was able to kind of put it all together.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really cool. The statue of him that's there in the courtyard it was done by Bartholdi, who of course did the Statue of Liberty, but it is kind of controversial and a lot of people want to remove because he is Champollion resting his foot on the top of a pharaoh's head, like a statue of a pharaoh. And putting the bottom of your foot is really disrespectful in a lot of cultures. And it is very disrespectful in Egyptian cultures. So it is behind a gate, which is probably good. But at some point they probably, that's definitely because he had a huge, huge love and respect for Egypt and the people and the history and everything. So I don't think that it is at all the intention when they had it created. But some people aren't very happy about that.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. But down a little bit further, there is another square. You can just walk down here and sit in all the parks. Now it's called the square Samuel Paty. Samuel Paty was the teacher that was brutally killed and beheaded in October of 2021. He was teaching a class, and his class was all about, freedom of speech and all of these and everything associated with that. He had showed 2 cartoons of Muhammad from Charlie Hebdo paper that everybody knows from the Charlie Hebdo attack. A student was in the class and went home and told her father about it. Her father ended up going online on social media and started talking about it. And some very horrible radicals saw it and ended up coming to the school and showing pictures saying, who was this guy, and paying students and saying, if I'll pay you 300 euros if you tell me who this is. And they gave up his name, these students did. And he was actually from Russia, Abdullah Anzakov. He ended up following Samuel home and stabbing him and then beheading him in a street in front of his house.
That's absolutely horrible.
It's horrible. This was 2020. This was 2 years ago this happened. And then they ended up finding out that the student actually kind of lied to her father about what was actually being said in the class. And then the police ended up coming and arresting 15 people, including students, the students that took money to give up who he was. They ended up coming and arresting them and trying all of these the adults and everything. So they renamed this park to Samuel a couple years ago, or on the 1 year of his death, so 2021. But he, it was a big ceremony that the president of France did in the courtyard of the Sorbonne. I remember watching it during COVID. But it's horrendous and really, but now, now they all admitted that, oh, we kind of lied about that. So it's kind of too bad.
Yeah.
In this park is a statue that is it's called the Carpathian Wolf. And it is of Romulus and Remus, and Romulus and Remus were the two children that were thrown into a basket. They were the daughter of Rhea Silvia and Mars. They were thrown into the basket in the Tiber River, and they washed up on the banks of the river, and a wolf found them. And the wolf was able to keep them awake by its milk. And Romulus is one who ended up going on to build and create Rome, and he named Rome after himself. But you see the statue a lot. It's here in the park. It's a copy of one that's from Rome. There's one in the Louvre, and it's the wolf with these two babies basically feeding, suckling off the wolf.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little look for a statue. But it sits right in front. This park is right in front of the Musée Cluny. So it's a museum of the Middle Ages of Paris. It just reopened this last May. And it's really fantastic. They did an amazing job on it. A lot of people know this is where the unicorn tapestries are, but don't just go for that. Go and check everything out. What is really, really cool is they have original ancient pieces of things like like of Notre Dame and also Saint-Germain-des-Prés, but they also have pieces of churches like the Abbey of Saint-Geneviève, where nothing remains of that abbey anymore. All of those things have been destroyed. It's really, really cool, and they did a great job telling the stories with the plaques and everything. They also have the statues of the heads that were originally on Notre Dame that then were chopped down during the revolution, of the statues of the kings that, people thought they were the kings of France when they were actually the kings of Judah. But they were saved and found in somebody's backyard in the 70s. And now those are in the Cluny. And I was so excited in May to go right when that weekend it reopened, so I could go see those statues again.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah, it's very cool. But there's lots of things to see. The Latin Quarter, which is the 5th, is a Latin Quarter. There's just, I'm a left banker. I love the left bank. I live on the left bank. And that is just where, there's just so much history, because parts of this area were untouched by what was when they were cutting through the city. You have the major boulevards, Boulevard Saint-Germain, and Rue Soufflot and some of that area, but a lot of it is, you really have the older vestiges of Paris over there in the Latin Quarter.
And make sure you guys give Claudine a call if you want some travel planning, or head over to her website, claudinehemingway.com, or you can book her for your very own tour and listen to her in person instead of on the radio. Tune in next week, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, claudinehemingway.com.